Now, from Austin, Texas, Politics with the Big Dogs, and your host, Anthony Holm.
Hello. This is Anthony Holm. You're listening to Politics with the Big Dogs. Remember, go to politicswiththebigdogs.com. We want your feedback. We want your input. We want you engaged. So we have a great show today, folks. We have Democratic activist, former ED of the state party, the Texas Democratic Party, Monique Alcala. I'll say she is much more reasonable than most of them. And we're going to do a Q&A. What happened to the activist left? How has it gotten so extreme that their headlines are let's transition children and let's have all our children go to the same bathroom? They're just so out of step with the values and the decency of Texans that they have no hope in sight of catching up to us, frankly. So we're going to talk to her, have a real honest and open conversation. What has happened to the party? Are these the values that they're holding near and dear, or are these just the headlines? Frankly, I'm going to advance a premise. And the premise is this: if they were a little more mainstream, maybe they could help us, you and I, put pressure on the Republicans who are failing on some of the mainstream issues, like we're lowering property taxes, right? A moderately engaged Democratic Party who wasn't talking about grown men dressed in drag reading books to our children in public libraries might be able to help us contest this property tax debacle we have going on in the state of Texas, but they're so extreme, they're so out there that they just can't be of value. And we're going to get right into the heart of censorship, specifically YouTube, what they did to President Trump, what they're doing to conservatives, but all of these social media platforms are violating our ideas, our beliefs, our sense of decency and justice and fairness. I'm speaking primarily about YouTube today, and that's because so many people watch and use YouTube. In fact, they have 1 billion engagements a day. 1 billion with a B. That is the number one source of information across the world anymore. So let's get into it. We're going to talk some censorship of YouTube, how they violate the sense of fairness and decency and silence conservative speech. And then we're going to go and talk to a former recent executive director of the Democratic Party of Texas and say, how have you guys allowed yourselves to get pulled so far out to the fringes that you're really advancing crazy notions, crazy ideas, and bills and laws that Texas will never accept. They are keeping themselves in the fringes of society with no real game plan in sight for them to come back into any type of position of authority or power. So let's start with YouTube. We all know it. We all saw it. We may not remember it. So what happened? President Trump got banned for 2 years. Deplatformed is what they called it. Okay, they didn't like what he had to say. But we got to ask, if this is the standard for a conservative, if this is the standard for President Trump, what about the Taliban? What about the terrorists? The hypocrisy of YouTube silencing President Trump while letting terrorists remain on their platform, have YouTube channels, have information about terrorism, the Taliban, the radical Muslim caliphates, while Donald Trump and those of us who want to read, hear, learn more about the MAGA movement, about conservative ideas and principles, you can't get him on YouTube. He's deplatformed for 2 years. So what happened? President Trump sued them, and thank goodness he did. Recently, they had to pay $25 million to try to resolve it. Look, this just makes my blood boil. It's a blatant double standard of big tech, in this instance specifically YouTube, but Facebook and frankly CNN does a version of this. Hallelujah that formerly Twitter was purchased by Elon Musk so that we'd have an open dialogue, a platform that we, all of us, could bring our ideas and discussions and debates. This show, and that's called X. He rebranded it X, and thank goodness. YouTube had to write a check to President Trump for $24.5 million to settle the lawsuit of their censorship of him. That's right. YouTube admitted they were wrong by paying up. That's the bottom line. We knew they were wrong. They probably knew they were wrong at the time. Certainly President Trump did. But we lost years of opportunity to communicate with each other, to follow issues, and to spread our message. Why? Because some Silicon Valley leftist liberals who made a bunch of money and control access to what are now effectively our television sets, our telephones, the communication channels on which we're all sharing information. They're controlling them. It's happening with the chatbots too. They're giving liberal responses. So garbage in, garbage out. And when you're relying on CNN, that's garbage going in. CNN articles and news to scan and research and give you information, so you're going to have garbage coming out. But back to censorship, because this story goes much deeper than just the settlement. This is about who at Big Tech decides who deserves a platform to have their own speech and who doesn't. And when you see who they silence versus who they allowed to keep posting, the hypocrisy is stunning. It's almost criminal. Let's set the scene. January of 2021, YouTube, along with then Twitter, Facebook, and all these other big platforms, suspended Donald Trump's accounts following the January 6th incident at the Capitol. Now, YouTube claimed that Trump violated their policies on inciting violence. They said, hey, we already have this handbook. We have these policies. You've incited violence. Therefore, you're out. I think they initially said you'll never come back on. They ended up taking him out for 2 years. But they indefinitely suspended his account. The sitting president of the United States at the time, he was still president until noon on January 20th. He had tens of millions of followers who wanted to hear from him. Nope, you're gone. You don't get to be on YouTube anymore at all. Imagine that, the audacity. Now, think about that. A private company based in Silicon Valley, crazy liberal California, decided that the President of the United States would not be permitted, that Americans, you and I and others like us, would not have the opportunity to hear the President of the United States. Congress didn't make that decision. It wasn't courts. It wasn't you, the voters. It was executives at YouTube in their boardroom pontificating with their goat milk lattes, having driven there in their electric vehicles, deciding America doesn't get to hear from their president. They kept him banned until March of 2023. 2 years and 2 months. That's when they finally decided to reinstate him. Conveniently, right as he was running for president again. And their excuse of why? Well, they wanted the voters to hear equally from major national candidates. I don't know about you guys, but I doubt that's their real motivation. I think they were going, holy smokes, he's going to be president again. We better do this. Imagine that. Well, we want the voters to hear from each major candidate. Donald Trump was a major candidate for the 2 years that he was deplatformed. I mean, frankly, the Silicon Valley guys didn't want us hearing from Biden because we would have all known that he wasn't up to snuff. This was a huge cover-up, but they silenced our guy, no question. So now they claim to care about the voters, right? Oh, he's running for president. They didn't seem to care about the voters in all of 2021, all of 2022, or all of 2023. It gets even more interesting. This is where it gets real curious, folks. Trump didn't just accept this. He went and he sued him. And just recently, he won. He won because they paid him $24.5 million. We get deplatformed. We're not going to sue him. Hallelujah, President Trump had the money, took the time, and the tenacity to file suit. $24.5 million is not pocket change. That's YouTube admitting they were wrong without having to say the words in court. Because if they thought they were right, if they really believed that Trump violated their terms of service fairly and appropriately, and they applied those same terms to everybody else, and it wasn't selective deplatforming on their part, then they're not going to pay $25 million. So, hallelujah for Trump. But most importantly, the entity, YouTube, the largest television provider in America, as I understand it, but certainly 1 billion people a day are on YouTube, deplatformed him. If they can do that to the incumbent president, they deplatformed him while he was president. Think of what they can do to the rest of us. But now back up, because we've just been talking about President Trump. Now let's talk about the terrorists. Let's look at and let's talk about who YouTube treated differently. And this is where your jaw is going to drop, because it's all about the timing and the selective enforcement. When Trump posted a video on January 6th telling protesters to go home peacefully, YouTube banned him within days. Gone. 2 years before they let him back. Let's talk about the Taliban. That's right. the Taliban. The same Taliban that harbored Osama bin Laden, the same group that murdered American soldiers for 20 years. When they took over Afghanistan in August of 2021, their supporters flooded YouTube with propaganda videos. Pro-Taliban influencers and content creators were posting regularly, celebrating their takeover, celebrating the victory of the Taliban. YouTube says, we've got a long-held policy, quote-unquote, long-held policy against Taliban accounts. But here's the thing. Enforcement at best was slow. It was inconsistent and certainly wasn't within hours like they shut down the President of the United States on January 6th. He was still president. We've had a long-held policy, says YouTube, against Taliban accounts, but they're still out there. Oh, we're doing what we can. Yeah, we're working hard. We're working fast. Months and months and months, and they're still out there. We're talking about terrorist organizations, folks. YouTube took their sweet time removing content while Afghanistani bloggers were thriving under the Taliban rule and putting it all over the place, saying they're Taliban activists promoting it on YouTube, and they took their sweet time. Yet Trump's out instantly while he's still the president. What about like Press TV, Iran's state-run propaganda network? You know, it's been common for these bad actor nations around the world to create their own TV networks and pretend like it's a news organization. Now, YouTube did finally ban Press TV. In fact, they did it multiple times, is my understanding. They've been banned 7 different times over the last many years. But here's what's telling. They keep coming back. YouTube keeps letting them on. But they were going to ban President Trump indefinitely. And they only let him back, they claimed, because, well, now he's running for president again. Press TV, Taliban's outlet, in-house outlet for terrorism, keeps getting relisted onto YouTube with their authority, with YouTube's authority and power. And this thing called Hispan TV, which is the Iranian state media. They had their account disabled in 2019 without warning, is what YouTube claims, but suddenly they came back. It's just up and down for the terrorists, but it's a hard stop of indefinite ban for President Trump. 2 years, 2 months later, oh, you're running for president again? Okay, you can come on. So for Trump, it's a definite ban. For terrorists and the Taliban, it's a short-term disablement. You could come on in a little bit. Try to keep the beheadings to a minimal is what they're saying. It's not just the Taliban, the Chinese. We got to talk about the Chinese. Literally the Communist Party propaganda outlets of CGTN and Xinhua have maintained XINHUA. So the Chinese, they've maintained very robust YouTube presences. They post daily. They spread disinformation about genocide in Uyghur, I'm unclear how to say that, about Hong Kong and about Taiwan. They're flourishing on YouTube, yet President Trump was indefinitely banned instantly. So the Chinese Communist Party, which runs concentration camps, which had disappeared Jack Ma, activist for freedom and liberty, and a guy who produced newspapers that were truthful. This is a nation and a party threatening to invade Taiwan and presumably going to do it. Their propaganda arm gets to roll freely on YouTube while the President of the United States was silent. Think about that, folks. That is censorship in America. Censorship with a smile. Coming to you from Silicon Valley with a smile. The Taliban, Iran, the Communist Party of China, no problem. Come and go as you like. Trump, you're out. Silenced. This is why they think it's okay for little boys and little girls to share the same bathroom, because they think they control the spigot of information. They think that they can force feed you through Netflix and all of these social platforms that it's okay for a little boy who's 8 to be transitioned to a little girl, and for his mom to flee to California and the Texas Supreme Court not do anything. We can make the people believe this is okay because we control the channels of information. No more. Goodness, we talked about COVID. Maybe there's alternative treatments, and And maybe this medicine that's been around the U.S. for 30 years actually works. Oh, no, you're banned from Facebook. You're slapped down. Censorship with a smile from Silicon Valley. That's how they think they're going to defeat our ideas and the safety of our children and the resolve of our absolute commitment to liberty and the foundational beliefs of America. Thank you so much. We're going to transition right after this break, and we'll have Monique Alcala up and figure out what is happening with the crazy old Texas Democratic Party.
Politics with the Big Dogs with Anthony Holm is supported in part by the First Amendment Alliance Education Fund. Learn more about today's guest and hear other episodes online in our archive. Visit politicswiththebigdogs.com. If you have a question for Anthony Holm, email Anthony at politicswiththebigdogs.com.
You're listening to Politics with the Big Dogs. Today we have a big dog on the show. We're here with Monique Alcala, who is a big dog among the Democrats and the liberals in the U.S. and Texas, and recently executive director of the state party of Texas. She and I have debated on a number of television programs where they've wanted a Republican or conservative-leaning person. They've called me, and a liberal they've called Monique, and I wanted to bring her on the show and ask her why she is so misplaced in her beliefs. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Anthony.
Tell us about you and you're rooted in your positions. You're a smart, thoughtful human, and I'm curious as to how you came to this belief system.
Yeah, so I'm a native Texan. My family is originally from the city of Buda, which has grown tremendously, as you know, one of the fastest growing counties in the country. My family owns the first established Mexican restaurant in the town, and my grandmother there was the first Hispanic business owner, in fact, in the city of Buda. So they were recently named the city's local legend for the year. So both my grandmother Helen and my dad Renee, who have both passed away, both in 2017 and 2022. But yeah, I grew up both in Hays County and then also in Travis County. And, a lot of my belief system has been influenced by just growing up as a woman, growing up as a person of color. Some of the things that both my grandmother and my father and, just my family generally had to experience growing up. And, I didn't think that I was going to actually end up in politics. I moved away in my late 20s as a single mom, ended up in Virginia, jumped on my first campaign there. Probably the best place to start on campaigns because they have competitive elections every single cycle. So worked on a bunch of electoral stuff, from presidential all the way down ballots to the local stuff. I've also done issue advocacy for immigrants' rights, for women's rights. But again, I think that a lot of the stuff that I've really focused on throughout my career has really been driven by building strong coalitions, ensuring that we have an inclusive democratic process, and as many people can participate in our elections as possible. So, that brought me back to Texas. I took a job with a national organization that I'm sure everybody that's listening loves, which is called Emily's List. It is the nation's largest resource for pro-choice Democratic women. So I worked with them for about 2 years, and then this job opened up right after my father passed away, who was extremely influential and just a supportive person for me throughout my entire career. My mom is an immigrant, and she, for her, I'm sure if anyone has an immigrant Asian mom, they know exactly what I'm talking about when I say either you have to be a doctor or a lawyer. And I definitely did not want to be either one of those things, maybe a lawyer. But when I jumped into campaigns and all of the unpredictability and instability of it, my dad was always just that stable person for me throughout my career. So I know that he wanted to see a better Texas, one that was run by Democrats again. And so I wanted to dedicate all of my time to doing that. So that's why I joined the Texas Democratic Party, where I was there for a little less than 2 years.
Thank you for sharing that. And of course, we're both inspired by the story of your family, and it's hard to discuss loss, particularly that of a parent. And Hays County, which is just south of Austin, but it's part of the Hill Country, we think of as a conservative county, Wimberley, Texas, and Driftwood, and these small towns outside of Austin. But in fact, it is Democrat. It's like, I think 55% Democrat, which is always so surprising to me, but it is. And lovely community, Buda, which has just exploded in size, as have all these little towns around Austin. Much of what you said are great talking points, right? And the right has it as well. I don't want you to feel isolated or anything else. You're a very capable person, and but I'd like to get into the nitty gritty. That's what we do in this show is take issues more deeply. So I have a premise that I'm going to advance, and you can attack it, agree with it, or we can pick it apart and show me where I'm wrong. But my premise is effectively this, that the Democratic Party in America and in Texas has gotten itself so dug in and is advocating so loudly on fringe issues. And I'm defining fringe, which the bulk of America or the bulk of the citizenry do not support. The most obvious example, I believe, is men, biological men in women's sports, right? And here we had a presidential election not that long ago, about $1 billion with a B spent by Donald Trump's campaign, as I understand it. And roughly 1/3 of those dollars were spent on this issue. That suggests to me that the bulk of America, and certainly the swing voters, don't support biological men in women's sports. Yet it feels like, I don't know, 25 to 50% of the airtime and the volume that the Democrats have and use is dedicated to this issue. So this is an example of issues where I believe that the Democrats have basically put themselves in a box that they just can't get out of. They can't praise other issues at the mainstream that Republicans might do because they're banging on Republicans. What do you think about that premise?
Yeah, I think that the issue of trans and everything that we keep talking about with the trans community, I mean, the reality is the trans community or people who identify as trans here in the state are like 0.42% of the entire population here in Texas. And, I think that a lot of these conversations are things that should be addressed within the family. And I think that, especially when it comes to like medical decisions, like those are things that should be addressed with the parents and the doctors and like those expert opinions. And I think the real problem here in Texas is not that we don't have, and actually I would argue that we have majoritarian opinions across the board, whether it comes from whether it's trans issues, abortion issues, immigration, whatever, or the economy. But what we don't have here in the state is strong democratic infrastructure to be responsive to what the Republicans keep, what I argue, baiting us into these conversations. I think that we really want to talk about funding our schools. We really want to talk about ensuring that women have the right to make a decision to terminate a pregnancy if it's going to cost her life. And the thing that we in the state have to do is focus on actually building competitive elections here in the state. And I have so many different opinions about what we could do here.
Well, to that end, I mean, to be competitive, I'm going to suggest that you can't use 1/3 of the airtime talking about an issue like biological men in sports that by your statement prior was 0.00. And I think that's probably right. I think it's a very small segment of society. Now, all society should be protected and defended against. And you and I just disagree, I suspect, on that policy outcome. But the general point is different, right? You open with like, my father's visions of electing Democrats again. Well, the Democrats that were in power in Texas used to believe in protecting your house from criminals, right? Used to believe in putting people in prison who were violent. They used to believe that, hey, we want the best outcomes for children, even if that's charter schools. They believed that men were men and women were women. There isn't something in the middle, and we said husband and wife. I remember the Democratic Party's control. I came in as a young collegiate and active in politics and legislature, and the D's controlled it all. So how is there a vision? Is there a pathway for the Democratic Party to get back into the, let's call it, mainstream? And if so, what do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that we're outside of the mainstream, but I do think that there's millions and actually probably arguably like billions of dollars that are being spent that give the perception both online and in traditional media that we are only talking about these issues. And we are like last year, we've gotten outspent like in pretty much every single frontline race, from especially at the state level. And I don't think that what we stand for is outside of the norm, but what we are talking about are like we're talking about things that are like on the margins, and things that we keep getting baited into.
Okay. I'm going to accept your statement that Democrats were outspent in Texas. 100% they were. I don't know that it's just a function of money, because I believe that message overcomes money. Now, you need money to get your message out, but if you have a good message, it can get out organically. And the last successful Democrat in Texas I recall doing this was Ann Richards. She was terribly outspent, right? She got like on a boat tour, went cruising up and down, got all this earned media, and I don't even remember her message, but it was effective, and she ended up winning and becoming governor. Now, I was real young. I was in high school and I think in college at the time. So I just, maybe I'm misremembering this, but let's take Texas off the board. And certainly the Democrats weren't outspent in Michigan or Ohio or Wisconsin or Virginia or elsewhere, or they're either losing to Donald Trump, who they seem to just detest top to bottom, or highly competitive or over competitive. And I'm going to suggest, and the premise is because of the message, right? And the message is the Democrats are identified as socialists, or a big portion of them. I mean, go to the Democratic Party's platform or their staff. I'm a socialist and I work for the Democratic Party. Or we believe in ranked choice voting, and we believe that same day and ballot drop-off, drive-by. I mean, that is in the platform. It's on their website. So my point is, particularly, let's just talk about swing voters, those who don't vote in a Republican primary or a Democratic primary. Will the Democratic Party ever come back into any type of functionality, independent of coming back to power, right? Functionality without at least toning down their advocacy for these pretty extreme positions? Extreme being defined by not accepted by the bulk of the independents. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, again, I guess they just reject the premise. I do think that the Democratic Party does stand for things that, like human rights and civil rights and, access to, being able to cast your ballot. But the issues that we're experiencing both here in Texas and across the country are, one, like I said earlier, we just don't have the democratic infrastructure. And we also, I think you'll see, and I'm willing to admit this as well, the party has lost trust with people. And so you have people that are not, and this is true for like Michigan and all the places that you were talking about. I don't think that people have confidence in whether that's right or wrong, have confidence in the Democratic Party on issues of the economy, on issues of border security and immigration. And that's something that we certainly have to fix. And that's going to take resources. That's going to take us being out there on the ground and building relationships back with voters, and not just people like our base, but people that left the party because they don't believe that we stand for the issues that they care about, like paying for groceries every week and being able to put gas in their car.
You made a great point, and I need to, in case people are just tuning in, this is Anthony Holm. You're listening to Politics with the Big Dogs, and we have a big dog on today, Monique Alcala, who is a very significant leader in the Democratic Party in Texas and nationally as well. They've done campaigns across Virginia and the U.S. and Emily's List, regional director, was recently the ED, executive director of the state party of Texas, a thoughtful, capable human with whom I've been on plenty of debates on television. I wanted to have her on the show to talk about in a little bit more depth. So here's what I think I just heard you say, is that whether you agree or disagree, look, and I do want to back up a touch. Everybody supports having honest and fair elections, right? Everybody supports access to high-quality education. What's happening, I believe, and I'm open to being wrong, and I'm open to hearing another opinion, is largely what you said. The citizenry really trusts Republicans more than Democrats on a safe border, for example, right? And the Democrats forever and a day, we're stopping the flow of, I won't even say it's illegal immigration. You know, it's displaced people walking illegally, walking across the border. Trump gets elected, whether you like him or not, we all have to be honest about it. Illegal immigration just stopped, all but stopped in 90 days. You said, hey, the Democrats are out of the mainstream or not received, at least viewed by Americans as the most successful in the economy. Yeah, that's true. Or on immigration, or on inflation, or on safety, or on combating crime. I mean, you know, I don't want to talk in generalities. I'd really like to take us down to some granular discussions. Like, I have a premise, which is, when is it going to be okay with Democrats to make crime illegal again? Right? Yeah, one of the things that they're talking about, we got to have cashless bails out defending folks who are accused of violent crime. On the website that I went to earlier, the Democratic Party's website, says, make it illegal to put those charged with violent family crimes in a cell. Like, that just, I'm going to suggest, doesn't play well as a message and a narrative to 80% of Texans. So, does the party have a path or an idea of what's the likelihood of the Democratic Party coming back into some type of reasonable messaging position?
I mean, that's going to start with the election of people who know how to win races here in the state. I mean, you've seen, I think for the last, 30, 40 years or so, you've seen a complete dismantling of the Democratic infrastructure all across the state. That inhibits our ability to communicate with voters and inhibits our ability to even think about how to run competitive races here in the state. I mean, I was right at the center of it this past cycle in 2024 whenever I was working at the state party. You know, state parties, I think, are really functional, and they should be, at least conceptually, and this is how they were supposed to be constructed. State parties, whether it's the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, are supposed to be functional pieces of our democracy. And whenever they function well, we have policies that are built by consensus. We have policies that are reflective of the needs of the voters, both here in the state and across the country. But you've seen this hyperpolarization happen for the last, however many years, and people are just sort of like, they've been talking about things that people are just not connecting with. But, back to what I was saying about the infrastructure, I've seen how competitive races are structured I've worked in a dozen states at this point, and some of the things that we do here in the state, and I think this is a lot more true for the Democrats, because we have to get it together, because for the Democrats, we don't have a statewide elected that's operating as like the center of gravity here in the state. And so what we lack here is a center of gravity, is somebody who is directing all of these disparate places to like how we should be, what is our strategic vision for each of the cycle, or for each of the election years? Like, what are we messaging on? Are we all saying this, what we stand for as a party? How is government going to look different underneath the Democratic governor or senator or state legislature? So none of that stuff exists. I mean, you have people at the top of the Democratic Party right now that are six-time losers, that are saying that renting a desk in, I don't know, all these quote unquote satellite offices is expanding our footprint across the state. Like, I think that's insane. I think any other, professional Democratic operative outside of Texas is going to be like, what are you talking about? You're running a debt bank. How is that any different? I mean, when I paid the debt down last year, if I would have thought that paying, pennies on the dollar for a desk in Amarillo was going to win us more votes, I would have done that last year, but it's performative. We actually have to do the things in order to win elections, and that is raise a lot of money, make our case outside of the state, organize people on the ground, and have and actually talk about the things that matter. I mean, like I was saying, everybody cares about buying their groceries every week, putting gas in their car, actually getting a job, and just having access to healthcare. So there's so much stuff that I think that we need to do structurally and culturally within the Democratic Party before we're able to actually win an election.
Wow. Well, number one, thank you. And second, let's make sure our viewers understand. Here's what I think you're referencing. You tell me if I'm wrong, that it was announced not too long ago the Democratic Party was basically closing down its operations in Austin, but maybe going to keep one desk, I think is what I saw, to paraphrase a quote, and was going to put 6 or 7 people out around Texas at a single desk, one of which was in Amarillo. Is that what we're referencing?
Yeah.
I hope, obviously, the Democratic Party never wins statewide elections because they have different values than I have. But I will say that if there was even a moderately functional Democratic Party, I think it would help advance conservative policies. And here's the most obvious one to me: property taxes. I mean, really, Republicans are the Texas legislature has largely failed conservatives on reducing property taxes. They had a $20-25 billion surplus, and they just spent it all. And in part, they got to do it because there wasn't a viable Democratic Party to talk about, hey, look at what these guys are doing. They're wasting all this money. They could give back tax money. Instead, they were talking about, well, Johnny here, he needs to be able to get a gold medal instead of your daughter Susie, and he ought to be able to swim against the girls' swim team. Like, all these Republicans during session came out and started tweeting, we just reduced property taxes by $50 billion. And then they got real quiet, right? When everyone was, we know better. And it was so bad that Abbott actually put on the special call, you got to reduce property taxes. So this massive budget surplus, no material reduction in property taxes, still haven't been. Folks like me are going, man, should I sell my home and move to a smaller one so I can afford it? It's $2,000 a month or more. Yet, I believe that if there was just even a moderately credible Democratic Party, the Republicans would have to do some things like start reducing property taxes. So
yeah,
I didn't hear
agree.
any of that from the party. Speak to me.
No, I agree. We don't. In order for policies to work for the everyday person, we have to be able to compete, and we're just not there yet. And I don't think that we're going to be there yet. I mean, I think maybe 2026 will be a really interesting year. I think the backlash against some of the extremism that the Trump administration has been implementing will be pretty significant. And we saw his effort to, sort of tamp down on that with his mid-decade redistricting plan.
Hold on. I got to jump in there. So look, the upside for Democrats, in my opinion, is they're better at messaging. They're just taking weaker issues. So, for example, Texas is about 55% Republican, and about 65% of the U.S. House seats were Republican prior to this redistricting. California is 60-40 state, but it had 80% Democrat U.S. House seats. New York, same thing, about a 60-40 state, yet it had 80% Democratic House seats. Illinois, closer to like a 55-45 Democratic state, and I think it had 88% Democratic House seats. So, and those are all from the biennial. The Democrats taught Republicans really how to gerrymander. And now your point that I'm hearing is, hey, Texas just did this mid-election cycle, mid-decade redistricting, and they did. And if things turn out the way they're hoping, There'll be 80%. It'll just become in parity with California currently. And Newsom's, the governor of California, is saying, oh, we're going to respond to Texas. We're going to go do 90%. So, okay, you're going to have 40% of your population be Republicans. You're going to give them 10% of the U.S. House seats. I actually think it's going to be a massive backfire. But Republicans were too inept to get in front of the message like this. Now they're defensively in Texas on redistricting. But so what say you there? Do you not see that as an exposure point nationally for Gavin Newsom in Illinois?
No, I don't think so. I mean, so in California, I think some of these legislatures that you talked about, so California, Illinois, Virginia, some of these other legislatures that you've used as data points, like they have independent redistricting commissions. And I think overwhelmingly in Democratic controlled states, you'll find that there are independent redistricting. And I'm sorry that it's uncomfortable to see that in California, and now we're seeing in Wisconsin, that whenever you have fair maps, that's whenever Democrats win. And so, and so it's crazy to me that the messaging point here is that we're just that Republicans are just trying to be on parity with the Democrats whenever we have independent redistricting commissions in all of these states. So we're doing mid-decade redistricting. I think that's insane. Why not wait for the next census? Like a normal.
So why is California doing it? And but look,
they're doing that in response to this, right? I mean,
what you just said was the best example of why Democrats are such good messengers. Right. Well, we have these independent. It was a wonderful, wonderful message, but it's not true. Yes, they exist, but the Democratic legislative bodies defund them and make sure that they get to implement those maps. Okay, fine, they exist in name only. Look, I'm going to have you back. We're getting to a point where we're running out of time.
I think it was, I know, but I think it was Trump, and I forget who was here in the legislature who explicitly said that this was in response to trying to protect themselves against the backlash for mid-decade for the mid-cycle or midterm election. So I mean, it's partisan. It was for political reasons. This is not the thing that is the best interest of Texans. And I think at the end of the day, that's the question you need to be answering: is was this done for partisan reasons? And I think that was very clear.
Yeah, I don't think anybody disputes that. I agree with it. I think Trump led with it and said it. I think that's why it's already 80-20 in California, because it's partisan reasons, and it's 80-20 in New York because it's partisan, right? And look, what you said implicitly is again why I think Republicans failed on the front side. We should have just come out and said, hey, we have a very narrow margin out of the 435 U.S. House members, and as a result, we can't lower taxes. We can't lower the deficit. We can't scale back some of government's reach. We can't go secure the border and fight crime because Democrats won't let us. We have a nominal majority in the U.S. House because California cheated. They're 80-20, even though it's a 60-40 state, and New York cheated, and Illinois cheated. And Texas, we need to get a few more out of you. Look, that's all true. And your point of like, hey, it's political, I got to give it to Trump. He has no hesitation. He has no hesitation being honest about it, right? The Biden DOJ, Biden White House was involved. You go and prosecute everybody. I don't agree with government prosecuting people who are political enemies. I was aggressively sought by through a political prosecution at one point in my life, and I'm intimately familiar with it. But I've got to give tremendous credit for Trump just calling it what it is. He's going out in the mainstream saying, yeah, go prosecute James Comey. Yeah, go prosecute the people who came after me. You know, it might be better, though it's nominally better, that it's out in the public, because the Biden DOJ and the Obama DOJ, they were all, this is just this is a standalone attorney general just seeking out everybody who's a patriot. Anybody who has a name Patriot or Tea Party, they're all being audited and they're all being prosecuted. So, but your point is taken that, yeah, it was highly political. Zero question.
Yeah, and I mean, if we want to talk about the overall goal of legislating so that we make people's lives better, like there's no reason to start from the politics of it. We need to start from the humanity of it. And I think that because we have a completely dysfunctional Democratic Party here in the state, because Republicans have been overrunning us with a bunch of money and just pushing through like these really, I would argue, unpopular policies. Like, government is not working for people, and that's what we need to fix here in the state.
I think we're generally in agreement on certainly the broad swath, and I'll help. For example, I'm devoutly like, but Republicans passed a law that bans abortion for rape and incest. That is way outside of the mainstream. It's a 90-10 issue. And if Democrats were out talking to the mainstream voter about that, I think it would have a lot of impact. They're not. They're talking about the blue-haired man who's 6'4" and wants to read Johnny Has Two Daddies at the public library, right? And they're allowing the debate over there. I actually think that a functional Democratic Party or moderately functional would help us lower property taxes, right? That was an example I get it. So it used to be that the Republican Party, you know, so we've had the majority for almost 30 years now, top to bottom, and I'm going to suggest that as a policy body, we're wasting much of the Republican majority. You know, for 15 or 18 years, if Republicans voted for tort reform, and I'm a big advocate of, have been traditionally a big advocate of tort reform. The trial lawyers and the judges were really killing the system here in Texas 35 years ago, and been active with Texans for lawsuit reform, but they basically donated 50 to 100 million to Republicans and Democrats, and it said, hey, if you vote for tort reform, then you don't have to pass school choice, you don't have to lower property taxes, you don't have to have voter ID. I mean, I fought for 6 years to get voter ID. Go imagine Todd Smith, a Republican state House member from Tarrant County. He was the chair of the committee. He's like, nope, not going to do it. Don't think people should have to have a valid identification to vote. I'm like, what? Nothing with a photo. What? So we lost so much time to advance sound, good policies. And now TLR has really been shifted. They got too extreme, and a lot of Republicans shifted against them and said, hey, you're closing the courthouse, and we're constitutionalists, and we do believe in the jury system and electing our judges. But there was such an implosion in the Democratic Party that Republicans kind of don't have to do the basics, like lower property taxes. They can do 2 or 3 big issues. We just got portability of school funding. We're like the 30th state, and we're not doing focus on outcomes, and we're allowing Democrats to villainize charter schools, which have uplifted more particularly brown and black kids in Texas than any other education system. And we were losing generations of children. And a whole bunch of Republicans are opposed to it. And a whole bunch of Republicans are pro-teacher unions. And they can be, because, frankly, the Democratic Party is non-existent. I think it's healthy to have 2 functional parties and debate real policy and not transgender extremism or Democrat state reps filing bills like, if somebody breaks into your house and is walking out with your TV, you can't shoot them because they need it more than you do, making it a crime, or saying we should have no cash bails, all cashless bails. Oh, and violent criminals, family violence, you don't get to put them in jail. I mean, what's happening with the party that they just can't talk about something somewhat mainstream?
There are so many things wrong with the party. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, when we get it together, I think it is our policies that are that actually are reflective of the needs of the people here in the state. We're not obsessed with accumulating power, like with this redistricting thing. Where, I think it was during the special session, right? Whenever Greg Abbott prioritized redistricting over flood relief. I mean, that's insane to me. I mean, we should have been talking about flood relief from the get-go. Like, this is something, I mean, this is an issue that was also preventable, because Republicans have abandoned the idea of building infrastructure in the state. I mean, this is how long has it been since they passed like any meaningful infrastructure in that area in Kerrville? I think they're like a couple decades or so. But you know, it's really unfortunate to me that we've gotten to a place in our politics where we're abandoning things like common sense policies and common sense things, and losing sight of our humanity because of hyper polarization here in the state. So I'm really looking forward to Democrats here in the state, at the state party, getting it together and really making things competitive. We need to stop playing small ball here. We need to start acting like the big dogs and really make things competitive here in the state. I mean, we have good ideas, and we just need to talk to more folks and present those as options for people all across the state.
Look, I don't know. That's kind of the genesis of my wanting you on here is I don't know if the Democratic Party has good ideas. The ones that I hear about are pretty fringe ideas. And I've got to admit, I'm not informed about the infrastructure spending in Kerrville, Texas. But I sure didn't hear Democrats 8 months ago saying, hey, we got to spend more in Kerrville. We got to build out the infrastructure. I've never heard that from them. I've never heard them say we need to go and build highways. I have heard them say we got to close all these charter schools. We got to only union teachers. We got to unionize this, right? We got to make sure that violent criminals aren't held in jail. And by God, we've got to make sure that our little boys who dress up like girls get to compete, right? Like that I know is a losing narrative. And what I'm hearing more and more is we don't have the infrastructure of the Democratic Party because we don't have the money. But even with all the infrastructure and with all the money, if you have a losing narrative, I don't believe there's a path to even a modicum of success, which means there's no path to reasonable debate of sound policies with Republicans. I don't want you guys winning, but, you know, holding Republicans, holding them accountable on property taxes, it would sure be nice. Like having a Democrat say, hey, we're all getting taxed out of our homes. That would actually really help the debate.
Yeah, but also like Democrats stand for fully funding our public school system because not everybody has access to a charter school. And you know, on the trans issue, I just think that at the end of the day, we view anybody who identifies as a trans person or, you know, regardless of how they identify, it's just a human being. And I don't think that I'm in any place or anybody else is in a place to determine how people should be spending their day to day, and also at the end of the day, I also don't believe that I have a place to be bullying somebody into how they should be, you know, living their life, you know, or putting up these restrictions. You know, I think that, you know, the argument can be made also for the issue of abortion. I think that we're what people would agree with here. I mean, the majority of people here in Texas agree that access to abortion should be a right. And the things that people start to get hyper focused on are these extreme cases, just like the trans issue. It's like everybody wants to hyper focus on these things that don't necessarily affect everybody's everyday life. And I just don't feel as though that I or any, especially not in a state legislator, should be in the business of determining how somebody should be living their life.
Fair enough. Thank you. Monique Alcala, very brave to come on and with a very conservative audience. But look, we want to have these debates. We want to have discussions about policies and having the best outcome for Texans. I appreciate you tremendously. I appreciate that you're a single mom who raised a dynamic daughter who's in college. And though I'm going to disagree with you on a lot of policies, I think you're a good human. I sure appreciate you coming on.
It's been a wonderful debate with you, as always, Anthony.
Sure appreciate you.
From deep in the heart of Texas, you've been listening to Politics with the Big Dogs.